Welcome to extraterrestrial reality. Well, more proof has emerged that shows that these non-human intelligent beings present on Earth are most certainly interested in our nuclear weapons. In fact, they told an Air Force veteran, Richard Barth, back in 1964, that they're never going to allow it to happen. They're not going to allow us to kill this, to destroy ourselves with nuclear weapons, that they will stop it. And this is a very interesting story. Actually, this week, Jesse Michaels, who has a very excellent YouTube channel, he had this special guest on, Richard Barth, who was an Air Force vet who was stationed at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California back in 1964, which, by the way, now is Vandenberg Space Force Base. Right now it's a Space Force, which makes sense considering a lot of the stuff that's happened there over the decades, including this incident in September of 1964, which happens to be the same month that Bob Jacobs, a expert who worked with the Air Force back then, who was tasked with filming dummy nuclear warheads flying, being launched out of Vandenberg. He's the one who, the Bob Jacobs is the guy who talked about that that it was filmed, and when they looked at the film later on, it showed that this UFO, a flying saucer, showed up and shot beams of light at the dummy warhead and knocked it out of the sky. And he was told never to talk about it, but he did start talking about it back in the 1980s, and he's been talking about it ever since. And it happened that incident happened in September of 1964 in Vandenberg Air Force Base. And Richard Barth, who was interviewed, shown this in this interview with Jesse Michaels this week, stated that his episode with aliens happened at the same place in September of 1964. And of course, I will leave a link so you could check out this interview that Jesse Michaels had with Richard Barth. It's incredible. The guy, like a lot of the witnesses I've had on the show recently, like Marvin Jacobs, the retired Marine Corps vet, who, by the way, will be appearing in a new episode coming up later this by the end of this week. We're supposed to get together on Friday and doing a show with him again. But like Marvin Jacobs had talked about when he was on my show, he said that in 1986, while he was stationed at a Marine Corps base in California, he found himself inside of a flying saucer. He had experiences with UFOs and aliens throughout his whole life, but then in 1986, he had another encounter while he was stationed in California, and he was brought aboard something. He doesn't know if it was a craft or an underground facility or what, but he was brought somewhere, and aliens showed him a movie that showed the end of the world, that World War III was happening, and our allies, the United States allies, most notably Germany, was dropping biological and chemical weapons in the United States, and the next thing the movie showed was the world ending, a nuclear holocaust, apparently. And there was no comment offered by the aliens when they showed Marvin Jacobs this, and he's been wondering about it his whole life. And because of events in the world recently, he felt compelled to discuss it publicly, because maybe there's something going on. Maybe with the way the world is right now, maybe we are headed toward World War III. That brought him forward to talk about this. And this is very similar, I find. Richard Barth, this guy, he was an Air Force vet, and he was very compelling interview, very believable kind of guy. And here we are again. How many times now have we seen incidents over the decades where it seems that these beings are very concerned with our nuclear weapons capability? I mean, we talk all the time about the 1967 Malmstrom Air Force Base incident in Montana, where UFO showed up and shut down all the missiles. There were 10 nuclear missiles on that base, and they were all shut down by a UFO. And then when the UFO left, they all went back online somehow. Obviously, these beings are upset and concerned about our nuclear capabilities, and now we have this new story from Richard Barth. Anyway, I'm not going to play anything from the interview because I don't want to get in trouble for copyright claims or anything to that effect, but I am going to read some information that somebody posted here on Reddit about it. And here's what it says. It says Air Force veteran claims Vandenberg nuclear missile site was infiltrated by non-human entities while he was stationed there. Richard Barth was guarding a missile site when a hooded being paralyzed him and abducted him. Next thing he knew, he was aboard a UFO hovering over the base with 4 other creatures. He was told that they were inspecting our missiles to understand how they worked in order to prevent nuclear war. This happened in September of 1964 at the same month-year base as Bob Jacobs' famous sighting of a UFO following an Atlas missile, shooting it with lasers and causing it to tumble out of the sky. Since then, other incursions have been recorded at Vandenberg. Yes, lots of incursions have been reported at Vandenberg. All over the place. Anywhere where you have nuclear missiles, it seems like these UFOs are most certainly interested in it. But here's some of the highlights on Reddit. This is on UFO Reddit I'm getting this from. Some of the highlights of this interview that Jesse Michaels had with Richard Barth. It says, there were 4 entities. They had a large head, small body, and dark eyes. That was one of the comments that Barth had supplied to Jesse Michaels during that interview. But anyway, it says here, the Air Force veteran just alleged that he was taken aboard a UFO from Vandenberg Air Force Base in 1964, and the entities revealed shocking things about the universe to him. First, they told him that they abducted him because they needed to access the nuclear weapons on the base. Why? Because they would never let humanity launch nukes. They told him that if humanity ever started a nuclear war, they would intervene. And they told him there are many other civilizations out there, some of which aren't as benevolent. This is Richard Barth's shocking testimony. So this happened, it was 2 a.m. in September of 1964. He doesn't know the exact date. Of course, that's a very long time ago. Anyway, he says this. Well, when you listen to this interview, he said that he was in his guard shack. He was on guard that night, stationed on guard. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden he sees somebody walking toward him in a trench coat, but apparently this was not a human being. And when this entity got close to him, he passed out, he conked out, and the next thing he knew, he was inside some sort of a flying saucer looking through some sort of a hole and on the floor, and it wasn't like a window. He said it was very clear, and he could see the base underneath, like they were flying over the base apparently. But anyway, here's what it says. I just saw a wall of fog. Barth was guarding a Minuteman missile launch site. Next thing I know, I see this shadow in the fog, which appeared to be a man or a humanoid figure, and I could feel it in my mind. It was like it started grabbing hold of me. As it approached me, I tried to pull my pistol, and my right arm was paralyzed. It was terrifying. The next thing I know, I don't know if I passed out. It's just blank at that point. I'm inside this circular room. I'm on my knees, and there's a 2.5 to 3 foot circle that's clear. I could see through it. There's this figure to my right, and it's communicating with me. Don't look at me, just look through the circle. It's weird because it's not words. So basically this being was communicating with him through telepathy. But it was interesting too when this figure was walking toward him, it was wearing what looked like a trench coat, but when it got closer to him, he realized this was not a human being, and then he passed out. And he doesn't have a memory of the face either. He said his mind draws a blank when he tries to remember the face of this, but he did see short alien beings on board with the big heads and the black eyes, like the grays, the classic grays. Anyway, continuing here, he says, it's weird because it's not words. So I'm looking at the circle, and what you see initially is just this gray fog. All of a sudden, this kind of clears away like clouds splitting. It's just getting light, and I could see this truck pull up to the gate. A guard came over to the right side of a truck and was checking whoever was driving, opened the gate, let the truck in, and then the clouds closed up. I'm still looking through this hole, and I kind of raised my eyes to look around. There were, opposite me, about 6 to 10 feet away, these 4 figures sitting on a bench. The wall of I'll call it a craft, I could see that the bench was just a continuation of the material or whatever the wall was. The figures were silhouetted like the light source was from the wall, but very consistent. They had a large head and a smaller body, disproportionate. The eyes were discernible because they were darker than the skin. Next thing he knew, Barth was back in his guard shack, lying on the floor. There's a little porch right in front of the door to the guard shack, and this being is sitting on the porch and has my head in its lap. It's communicating. I'm sorry, we didn't mean to scare you, but we had to have access to the site. The other thing was, it did not want me to see it. He says, Now I'm going to leave, and I want you to just keep your eyes shut. He left, and I laid there for maybe 15 minutes with my eyes shut. I finally got up and looked around, and there's a ridge of mountains, and the sun was coming up over that ridge. It was a beautiful sight. There was a little chipmunk on the ground, and I just felt so much love for that little chipmunk. I felt like I was joined with that chipmunk, one living creature to another, and it's kind of just looked back at me and scurried away. So that was some of his testimony here, and I'll leave a link for this as well as to the episode so you can check it out for yourself. But again, here we are. This guy, and he's coming out now after all these years. He's making a statement about what he experienced back in 1964 at the same place, the same month as that incident that involved Bob Jacobs, who was also stationed at Vandenberg Air Force Base back then, and who filmed a flying saucer shooting a missile out of the sky, a dummy warhead out of the sky after it came off the missile, off the top of the missile. Then this flying saucer showed up and shot that dummy warhead out of the sky, and it just dropped. And then Jacobs was brought in, shown to his superiors, and then he was told never to say anything about this. And at the same place. And I thought, well, Jesse Michaels made a point of this during that episode. He talked about that a lot. He wanted to make that clear that this was the same place, the same month, the same year as what Barth is talking about as what happened with Bob Jacobs, which is very, very interesting. And it goes back to what we already believe about this. Obviously, these beings, we don't know what their agenda is. Some of us have some ideas. Now, these guys were saying that they're good guys, and there's other ones out there that aren't as benevolent as they are. Are these the ones? Does the benevolence of these creatures involve a hybridization program? Is that part of their benevolence, or is that something else? I mean, I don't know. But the bottom line is that it does seem that this is one of the biggest things, one of their biggest concerns that NHI has with the human race. That is that we are going to destroy ourselves and make this planet unfit to live on because of our nuclear weapons. And we have a lot of them. There's a lot of nuclear missiles right now. Not as many as there were back during the Cold War era, but there are a lot. As of early 2026, there are approximately 12,300 to 12,500 nuclear warheads in the world, held by 9 nations, with Russia and the United States possessing nearly 90% of them. While thousands are in storage, roughly 3,900 warheads are deployed with operational forces, missiles, and aircraft, with about 2,100 of these on high alert. So here's the breakdown. And basically, Russia has the most, 5,459 approximately, and the United States has 5,177. I mean, think about that. Over 5,000 Russia has, over 5,000 the United States has. I mean, you don't need that many to destroy the planet. You only need about maybe 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and that's all you really need. But we have thousands of nuclear warheads, thousands of nuclear missiles. China has 600. And the rest of them are divvied up between France, the United Kingdom, Pakistan, India, Israel, and North Korea. There used to be a lot more missiles, but I mean, still, what are we doing? Yeah, what are we doing? Now, these beings said that one of the reasons that they came to Vandenberg that night, when Barth was there and he was abducted, was because they wanted to see what we had. So they snuck into the base somehow or some way, right? They took him, and who knows what else happened that night. We don't know. Did anybody else step forward? Was it the same time? For all we know, maybe it was the same day as that missile test with the Atlas missile that Bob Jacobs filmed. Maybe that's what was going on. Who knows? But the bottom line is, it seems like they snuck in there that night and they figured something out. And then you have to think about what happened in 1967. Maybe what was going on here, maybe in 1964, they were sneaking into our nuclear missile silos, trying to figure out what we're doing with all these missiles, trying to figure out how they worked. And that's when, and then in 1967, they meant the Malmstrom just to test things, to see if they could shut them down. Maybe that's what happened here. They figured it out in 64, and then in 67 they did a test run to see what they capabilities they had, see if they were able to shut them down, and they did. They shut them down temporarily, and then they reactivated them. They took them offline and then took them back online. So maybe that's what's going on here, folks. They were trying to figure out how these things tick back in '64 at Vandenberg, and then later on they wanted to see if they could if they figured it out correctly. So they did a test run at Malmstrom. Who knows? But what they were saying back then is that, hey, we're not going to allow this to happen. We will never allow a nuclear anyone to attack anyone else with nuclear weapons. And you have to think about it. They really showed up after World War II, didn't they? I mean, it really started up then. I mean, there was some stuff going on during World War II. There was stuff going on throughout the centuries, right? There was sightings here and there, sporadic, but not nearly as heavy as what it would become in 1947. But throughout World War II, there were the Foo Fighters. A lot of people were seeing them. A lot of pilots from both sides, right, of that conflict were seeing Foo Fighters, weird kind of orbs tailing their planes. They didn't know what it was all about. And then the war ends when the climactic ending to World War II involved dropping atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And then World War II finally comes to a conclusion. And then 46 people are starting to see stuff. There was the Swedish ghost rockets going on. There were people seeing UFOs in Sweden, but things really didn't take off until 1947 after Kenneth Arnold saw those 9 crescent-shaped objects flying at incredible speeds over Mount Rainier in Washington State. That's when things really took off. And it seems like ever since then, we've been dealing with this phenomenon, right? They did a flyover Washington, D.C. in 1952 on a couple of different days, and there was absolutely nothing that anybody could do about it. And then you have this incident now in Vandenberg, and another incident being reported during the same time that Bob Jacobs had his when he had his experience there, right? When they filmed flying saucer knocking out that dummy warhead from the sky, right? And then he was told never to say anything about it. And Richard Barth, who didn't say anything to anybody about it, he told Jesse Michaels in that interview that he never said anything about it to people on the base. He wasn't going to report that to his superiors. I mean, who knows what would have happened if he had? They probably would have told him to shut up, but who knows? Who knows what they would have done to him? So you had that. And then you had the Malmstrom incident in 1967. And then you had the other incident years later. And apparently there was an incident in Russia where the missiles were activated and World War III seemed like it was about to occur right then and there. A UFO showed up causing that to happen in Russia. The opposite of what happened in Malmstrom. But then the UFO flies away and then the missiles are deactivated, right? So obviously they're giving us a warning. I mean, you think about the Ariel School incident in September of 1994, all 60 plus little elementary school kids in broad daylight during a recess see a flying saucer land and alien creatures exited the craft. One of them communicated telepathically with a handful of those kids. They were shown images of destruction and they were told that technology is bad. Does it have to do with this? Or is that the message that these beings are trying to send us? I mean, yeah, on one hand, maybe they are really good. We don't know. We don't know what the agenda really is. Or maybe they're going to take over the world and they don't want us to spoil it for them. That could be what's happening here. I mean, really, we really don't want to destroy the world, right? We don't want to have a World War III. We don't want to have a nuclear holocaust, but hey, we might do that. We might try to do that. But these beings, let's see if somebody does try to start launching nuclear missiles at another country, right? Are these beings going to intervene? According to Richard Barth, that's what they told him back in 1964. I wonder if there's anybody in the secret control group who knows more about this. There's been a lot of talk recently that in fact, there's been some stories recently that President Trump might be disclosing the truth about UFOs sometime soon. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going wrong right now in the Trump administration, the very bad poll numbers right now. This might be a time where you might see somebody like President Trump disclose the truth about UFOs to try to take the heat off all the issues that he's has right now. I mean, so that could happen. I mean, we talked about this before. That's a possibility. Maybe we will get some sort of a disclosure. I don't know. Even if they do disclose, they're not going to tell the whole truth. Because here's one thing. Let me tell you something, folks. I don't think that they know the whole truth. I don't think people in the government actually know everything that's going on with this phenomenon. The more I think about it, the more I realize, how could they? How could they? How could anybody? Like people like Stephen Greer talk about, they know that all the aliens are good. Like, how does he know this? How does anybody know this? I don't know how anybody could possibly know this. I just don't see it, right? Even if you met with them, right, and they told you, yeah, we're really good and we're here to help you and all this kind of stuff, how do you know that for sure? How do you know that they actually come from another planet? I think that they do, but how would you be able to prove that? You might not be able to do that. I don't think you would be able to do that. I mean, even if, say, they took a deputy, say there is a disclosure and the aliens come out of hiding and they finally introduce themselves to the whole world and say, yes, we're your friends and we come from this planet. I mean, and they say, hey, we're going to take some of you guys to our planet to show you, so you could come back and tell everybody else about what we showed you. Even if that were to happen, and you put a deputation of scientists and officials and dignitaries together to be the team that goes off with the aliens to see their planet, right? How do you know that they're actually seeing another planet? How do you know that they're not just shown something that looks like they're on another world? It could be a whole giant AI trick. I mean, how would you know? There would be no way to prove it, really. The only way to prove it, I think, is we would have to develop the ability to go to other planets, to go to their planet ourselves. That would be the only way we'd be able to prove it to ourselves, I think. Doesn't make me right. That's just how I see it. I've talked about this before, I'm sure. But yeah, I don't know. Here's what I do know. One thing I could say, there's no question. There is no question. There's just so many different incidents involving these beings and nuclear missiles and nuclear facilities. I mean, they have an interest. There's no question that this non-human intelligence is most certainly concerned about our nuclear capabilities. There's no doubt about it. There's just so many different incursions over nuclear facilities over the decades. It's ridiculous at this point. They don't want us to destroy the world, whether they're here for our benefit or whether they're here for their own benefit, and they don't want this world to be destroyed because they have plans on taking it over at some point in the future and get rid of us. Whatever the case, right? We still don't want to destroy the planet, right? We need to get a grip somehow. But I found this Richard Barth interview fascinating, and I highly recommend, if you haven't seen it yet, I'm sure a lot of you out there have seen Jesse Michaels' interview with Richard Barth. Fascinating. It was so nice to have somebody else stepping forward and talking about what they know. It's more and more people are starting to do this now, folks, and it's great. And I do look forward to having Marvin Jacobs back on the show later this week. I'm excited about that. I think he's a great guy. Fantastic story that he told us. So interesting, so compelling, so believable. That, I mean, that's what I got the same feeling listening to that interview that Jesse Michaels had with Richard Barth. I had that same feeling when I listened to Richard Barth as I did when I had Marvin Jacobs on my show. It's so nice to see a lot of these veterans stepping forward and doing the right thing and telling the world what's going on here. Yeah, we're not alone. There's beings out there that are way more advanced than we are. They're concerned about what we're doing with these nuclear missiles, and they don't want to see us destroy the planet. Hey, we don't know what their agenda is, but at least we know one thing. They don't want us to destroy ourselves. They don't want us to be shooting nuclear missiles at each other. And they're saying that if we ever try to do that, they will stop it. I wonder if world leaders are aware of this. I wonder if all the nuclear missiles that everybody has, it's all for show because they know there's nothing they can do. They can't launch them. They can't shoot them. They know it would be. Some of them have to know that it would spell the end of the world, right? But at the same respect, do they also know that even if they tried, they're going to be stopped? I mean, I think that it's possible that these beings would be able to stop us. I think it's very possible. I wonder if Kim Jong-un in North Korea knows this. I wonder if he's aware of the alien presence on this planet, or is he completely stupid to it? But it is going to be interesting to see if anything happens with the president. Apparently, according to some reports, he was talking to other world leaders and they're all on board with UFO disclosure. I don't know if that's true or not. We'll find out as time goes on. But even if they do disclose the truth, I do not believe that they're going to be able to tell us the whole truth, because I don't see how they could know the whole truth. But I would love to, the one thing I would like to see before I go, right, is what all the stuff they have on Roswell. I don't think we're ever going to get it, because then that would mean they would have to say, yeah, we've been lying to you for 80 years. So I don't think we're ever going to get the Roswell stuff. They're going to act like they didn't know really anything about it until recent years. That's my feeling. They're going to just the disclosure will be another lie, right? They'll tell us there'll be some truth to it, but it'll be somewhat of a lie, right? Because they're not going to tell us about everything, I don't think. But hey, I would love to be wrong. I would love to be wrong. I have no problem being wrong if they were to finally, spill the goods here, spill the tea for us finally. It'd be great. It'd be fantastic. I think it would be in one respect that get disclosure just because somebody's poll numbers are bad. That would be, that's not that, I don't know if I like that too much, but at the same time, hey, I'll take disclosure any way we can get it. But, like I've talked about in previous episodes, we already have disclosure, folks. We don't need the government. You really don't need the government to tell you anything, right? If you don't know it, then you just didn't do your homework, right? If you don't know that we're not alone at this point, you just didn't do your homework. Right, that's just the bottom line. You're not that interested in it. You never looked into it. You just don't know. You just don't know anything, right? And you rely on like you would have to have someone in power telling you, right? And even then, you probably wouldn't care. That's the other thing. What will happen if it does happen? If the governments of the world finally do tell the truth, what's going to happen? How's the world going to react? Like I said, I'm starting to think the way things are right now, there's just so much going on. Some people will freak out a little bit. Some people will still say they don't believe it, right? And then the world will just go on. After a couple of weeks, it will just be back to business as usual. That's what I think. Doesn't make me right, but we'll see. I don't think we're going to get it anyway, but we'll see. There's always someone has something to say about disclosure, and then or we're going to get it. You always hear these stories. Oh yeah, disclosure's right around the corner. Then it doesn't happen, and another year goes by, and then another report comes. Oh yeah, they're getting ready to disclose, and then nothing happens. Another year goes by. It just keeps the same cycle over and over and over again. It's tiring, very tiring. But it wouldn't really matter. We already know. And the thing is, I'm sure that the control group knows more than we do, right, about what these beings are capable of doing and what they've done. But again, I don't think they know a lot. I don't think that's one of the things holding back disclosure. They don't know enough about these visitors. They don't know the extent of it. That's what I don't see how they could. I don't know how they could. How could they? That would be like ants on an anthill. Trying to figure out what we're all about. I mean, they just would never figure it out. They're just not going to know. They're not going to know about the human race that much. They're going to know. The only thing they're going to know about is when we step on them or spray them with bug spray. That's all they're going to. That's all they know. And beyond that, nothing. Not much. They know that we have food in refrigerators and cupboards that they like to try to get at sometimes. But the rest of it, they don't understand us. They just don't get us, and they never will, quite frankly. And I think that's the situation with these non-human intelligent beings on this planet. We'll know that they're there, but we're never going to figure it out. We're not going to understand where they're coming from or what they're. I think we're just too dumb at this point. Way too dumb. Maybe in 100,000 years. I don't know. Who knows? Anyway, I just want to say this. I want to say thank you all for joining me today. Until next time.